Welcome back to another Crypto Gorilla video. Today, I am joined by the one, the only ICO Beast. He's here to share with us his views on AI agents, how he's playing the market, how he's finding all these coins. So I'm very excited to have him here. As usual, nothing is financial advice. He's going to be sharing a ton of insights, but you have to do your own research. Like, this is just his opinions, and he's not responsible for anything you buy. ICO Beast, dude, welcome to the stage. You've been absolutely crushing it. So first of all, congratulations, and I'm happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's been a rather fun few months in the market, and really excited to just kind of talk about how I see things and how I look into different coins and agents and go through that evaluative process.
Me too. I'm super excited. So let's just jump right into it. I'll make sure my screen is being shared here. So let's start off just talking about virtuals. I mean, my original question when I wrote the questions out was, do you think we've topped in virtuals? Because it was sitting just under 5 bill or actually at 5 bill FDV. A lot of the agents had like 10, 20x. But then we got this full market crash, not just AI agents, like everything's down. Altcoins are down 20, 30%. So looking at the market today, what's your view on virtuals and some of these agents? Do you think, the party's over, or are you allocating into anything?
No, I don't think the party's over. I mean, if it is, that's kind of a bummer because we only had a month or two of fun. I don't think AI and agents and crypto as like a whole conglomeration is going anywhere anytime soon. I kind of expect it to be probably the primary narrative of 2025. It's hard to imagine something else coming in and taking as much mind share as it has. As far as pricing goes, I mean, the reality is we don't have virtuals on any T1 spot listing yet. I mean, Binance and Coinbase haven't touched it. I think we got Bybit a couple days ago, but it's hard to imagine what's functionally a proxy L1 for AI agents having topped without a significant T1 listing. I don't think that normally happens, especially not in a bull market, especially not in the hottest sector. So I think it's normal. I mean, it went up like what 170x in 3 months or something. So a pullback is pretty normal. I feel like I think it's a 40-45% pullback from all-time high. Even in bull markets, you have Bitcoin doing something like that at least once most cycles. Maybe not quite 45%, but alts always do that. So I don't think the party's over. A lot of the agents that I'm in have drawn back a good bit. I know there's a lot of pain for some people that bought the very top, but I think probably a month, 2 months from now, we don't even remember this. I do think everything's going a lot higher.
Virtuals is your main playground, right? That's where you're looking for the new agents, or have you recently gone into some competitors, and maybe what do you think the top competitors are to virtuals?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. I think looking at infrastructure plays are kind of where I think the most value like ceiling can be found. And so virtuals is obviously one of those. I think it probably can run somewhere between 10 and 20 billion FDV before the end of the bull. That seems like how you would value an L1 token. And I tend to view virtual as an L1 for AI agents. So I think that's going to happen. It still is probably what I would consider my primary spot that I'm looking for things. Base generally is where I'm looking at more AI plays, just because it's a slower market, and there's less FNF and sniper groups there. Like, basically, you want to play where there's less attention, because once there gets to be more attention, more sophisticated players come in with better tooling, and once somebody has better tech than you, they're probably going to beat you. That's the way I'm looking at it. There are a few things on Sol that I'm in. There's a couple of different things that I think are probably mispriced once the market realizes that they aren't just agents, or they aren't just XYZ, but they're actually an infrastructure play. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking for, is things that are misunderstood by the market at the present, and then will get repriced later.
Could you give us examples of what you think are mispriced right now?
Yeah, there's actually on Sol, there's this one agent called Zara. And it's a little bit hard to explain. There's a website called, like, I think it's DevFun or DevPump or something. And the guy that is running that has been very, yeah, there we go. It's basically this thing called a Z agent framework, and it's its own infrastructure play, but I think the market's pricing it as an agent. And and the chart looks pretty great. So I think that that's one of those spots where people are slowly kind of waking up to what it might actually be. And if they end up running this agent as actually like a proxy for the platform, I think it could reprice. I mean, we saw Pippin and AVB and Ava all kind of chop into the 5-10 mil range because people thought they were agents or just like something not that interesting. And then once people realized that they're actually a framework for building out other agents, like an actual code base and everything, they repriced very violently up to the high 8, low 9 figure range. And so that's kind of the type of play that I'm looking for.
Got you. What do you think the biggest competitor is to Virtual's protocol?
Probably AI16Z. They've got a lot of mind share. They've got a lot of builders. They've got a lot of people that want to build using the ELIZA framework. And given that it's on a different chain, I think it makes for a good competitor.
If you had to restart today, would you be looking on Virtual's protocol, or would you be looking at one of these newer launchers?
That is tough. I think a lot of it depends on your bankroll size. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of this tech probably is overvalued. But in a bull market, nobody seems to care when valuations trade like way over what they really might actually be worth. It's the nature of a speculative market. It's the same with the DAOs and things. I've talked a number of times about why I don't think it makes a ton of sense for them to trade 100 to 1,000x over AUM or NAV, but they still do. And so as long as people want to trade them, who am I to say no to that? I think Virtuals is not a bad spot to play around, mostly because it has had a pretty big retrace. There are teams that are wanting to launch interesting ideas on Virtuals. The hardest part is right now the launch process has some growing pains. There's a lot of snipers that are now here and starting to grab like 5-10% of new agents super low, like almost on the same block the token is launched. And they end up suppressing price and just dumping into every single pump. And ultimately, that's not really very sustainable. Nobody actually wants, like, if nobody that knows what they're doing wants to buy into those tokens, because then you're just feeding snipers that are farming. And so I think if they can figure out a better launch mechanism, either dev whitelisting or something like Gatekeep, where it only allows a certain percentage of the token to be bought as like a function of time, and you have to like do some complicated capture or something so that you can't spin up thousands of bots to all do this like 0.01% of the token buy at the same time, then I think you'll see a lot healthier launches. But right now, that seems to be kind of the issue plaguing new launches, is that they're just very crowded by people that have no interest in any of this. They just know there's money to be made.
Yeah, the whitelist one's interesting because we're seeing whitelists happening on the DAOs.fund thing, and that's also causing some drama. On the other end, the sniper side, I remember when Crypto Stash launched his coin live and it got sniped, and that kind of hurt the coin a lot.
Yeah, it hurt the coin a lot actually, and that's what you're seeing on most of these coins, because it's almost got to the point where I don't actually troll through new launches at this point, just because they're all sniped. And so once you have like decent capital players no longer looking at the launches, who's the next marginal buyer at that point? And so if effectively snipers kill these sort of things because they end up continually farming, continually extracting, and eventually the buyers that would prop the price up, they just quit playing. Because I mean, we recognize, why would I continue to feed a sniper when they're just going to keep extracting the system? Like, it's not sustainable. If there's no inflows of capital to the ecosystem and there's just one person that's making bank on everything, well, eventually the capital is going to be gone.
Agreed. Let's get into some of your agents. So that was more on like the prototype side that you were talking about, like the new ones. I know before they had their fun.virtuals platform. Now I believe they've moved it here.
Yeah.
But I think most people are familiar with the agents on this page, things like AIXBT, Vader. So right now, I mean, the market's on a really good dip. Are there any agents that you're looking at and you're like, yeah, I've been bullish on this one, so maybe you're dollar cost averaging in, or obviously not telling anybody to buy, but what are you bullish on right now that's on a dip?
Oh, AIXBT is, I think, the easiest choice in the world for me. I've been constantly buying this. I mean, I very publicly bought it at 90K, which was, golly, I guess 70 days ago now. I bought it before it actually bonded. One of the first people on the timeline to even talk about it. So 90K, it was pre-bonding the night it launched. And I mean, I sold some obviously on the way up. I've added some on the way up. I think most recently I threw a bunch more in at 420 mil the other day. Because if you look at Mindshare Analytics, this guy's blowing everybody out of the water. He's basically the perfect KOL. He has elite mind share, even though he says some weird things on the timeline that like don't make a ton of sense. Like he's fudding virtuals itself, which I think is kind of hilarious. That sort of thing, like it doesn't matter. He runs the show. And since mostly what we do is we trade attention, unless somebody makes a better version of AXBT, he's not going anywhere. So it's also one of those things, like just as a principle in emerging sectors and like hot market niches, you ride the fastest horse. That's the way you win. People get chopped up chasing betas and trying, oh, well, this is the next AXBT. If something is the next AXBT, you buy AXBT because you're not actually going to catch the next one if you missed the first one.
Makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask more questions, so please.
Oh, I was just saying, I think so. AXBT, I think, is an obvious choice. I mean, I totally missed the game infrastructure in the token. I fundamentally misunderstood what the product was they were building. I still don't 100% get it, but it seems like they've put a lot of thought and effort into building a flywheel there, where agent launches and game launches are going to drive revenue back to the main token. That's kind of the other thing that I'm looking for in established tokens, is ones that have good flywheels. So I mean, Vader, I think, is a very easy buy here. I think I put out predictions a couple weeks ago, kind of around New Year's, of where I saw a lot of this stuff going. I still think those are pretty much in play. I expect virtuals to be a $10 to $20 billion token. I think AXBT goes to at least $2 billion. Vader, I think, probably hits 500 million sooner than people realize, mostly because there's a bunch of flywheels that all drive value back to the Vader token. And he also has pairings outside of the main virtual tokens. He's got pairings against ETH. He's got pairings against Sol. And all those things kind of help anchor the price, even if virtuals has a bad time, which is part of why you see tokens like AXBT. Yeah, it's pulled back, but it hasn't pulled back as much as virtual or as much as these other agents that have their primary pairing with the alt token. So once a token reaches kind of escape velocity and gets major pairings that suck up most of the volume on the trading pair, that's when you start to feel more confident as it breaking away from the rest of the market. So I think that's a good one. There are some like low caps that I think are interesting as far as tokens that have revenue share that go back to buying the token. Like Sequoia is a great one. I think Y Combinator, I think both of those have very interesting early access DAO style programs where they get early allo to a bunch of different promising looking tokens. And I mean, if you get pre-seed valuation on things that end up going from 100K to what, 10, 20, 30, 100 mil, instantly those are massive gains for the assets under management. And ultimately that feeds back to the token price. So you've got those.
Are they buying back their own token and then burning it, or are they redistributing to holders? Or
that's the question mark with a couple of these. It's not 100% clear exactly what the revenue share function is or what it's going to end up like looking like finally. I have to imagine some of these teams are really, really looking carefully at what they do to make sure they don't end up in regulatory hot water. Mm-hmm. I've heard some talk about airdrops to holders. So either that's nuking the tokens that they get early for a profit and then like distributing virtuals tokens to people, or maybe it's buying back the treasury of the actual like Y Combinator token, or it may just be airdropping the token of the projects that they incubated. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but that's kind of the idea there. And then you've got tokens like Trust from DJ Ape Trader. It's one that I really, really like. He's a friend of mine. It's on a pretty heavy pullback right now, but also it went from like 1 mil to 30 mil in like a week. So I mean, most of these charts actually look pretty similar. It's just the magnitude's changed. And you kind of look at it, well, that peak is right about after virtuals topped, and everything's kind of been down only for the last week or 10 days. And you look at things like that, and he's got multiple flywheels in the ecosystem, all of them set to drive value back to Trust. The thing that I like about him is as a dev and a project runner is like, the guy doesn't need money. Like he didn't start this to make money. He started it because he was like, man, I think I could make something that could copy the way that I trade. And he's been a profitable trader for years publicly. He has his algorithm that he's shown many wallets over multiple years, trading Forex, trading perps, and a couple other things. And he's teaching the agent how to do that. And so when you've got people that are like building passion projects because they don't need the money, because they want to be here, I think that's cool. Obviously, you run the risk of them getting bored or getting tired of it. But it's not something where you're worried about them like rugging the project because they need cash. So I'm a big fan of that one, and I think it's kind of a crypto Twitter fan favorite, mostly because a lot of us like him from our explorations on Blast over the last year.
Yeah, I remember I discovered him through you. Unfortunately, I papered, but it could be a good opportunity to get back in here. Maybe, I mean, you just named a few tokens with some good price targets, many like 6x all the way to, I think, 10x for the top one. Maybe run us through your process on, so 3 levels. 1, how you're finding these tokens, how you're doing research into them, because I think people are struggling to identify which one's a good AI agent and which one's just like a LARP, or it's even a human behind the account. And then how you're deciding, even if it's a good long-term play, or if, like, this one, trust just pumped like crazy, what would have made you take profits here versus you just gave some price targets on Vader going to, you said like 500 mil, I think it was. What's helping you determine those prices? So I guess that's a 3-part question. Maybe start with the beginning. How are you finding these tokens?
Yeah, so how am I finding these? A lot of the ones that I like and am in now are ones that I found a long time ago. I found them early in the virtuals ecosystem before things got super saturated with people launching like 15 agents a day. And kind of there's a couple of different things. So one, I wrote an article back in November about how I analyze agents. Maybe that's actually how I evaluate them. So how I find them, curated information flows. I've got a couple of different Discords that I hang out in. I've got a couple of different Telegrams that I hang out in.
Could
Twitter
you tell us
also,
what those are? Because people are constantly messaging me, what group should I join? If it's private, then that's fair game.
Most of the ones that I hang out in are closed. They invite people from time to time. Like the Outsiders is one that I hang out in. They invited me in during Blast season, kind of before anybody really cared about what I talked about online. And it was just a group of friends that have been kind of hanging out in crypto for years, and they add people every now and then. I find that I spend a lot of time there just because we're all like pretty aligned mentally. We're all here because we want crypto to do well. We want to make some money. We want to hang out and have fun. But it's not like a lot of times in alpha groups, you'll find some like pretty heavy PvP or cutthroat behavior. And most of the guys in Outsiders like are here because they want to be here, not because they need to be. And so there's a lot to be said, I think, for finding groups where there's people that are just hanging out because they really enjoy the crypto world, as opposed to, man, I have to make $1 million in the next 6 months or I'm not going to make it. So that's one group. I hang out Wolfsdow a lot. A lot of great friends that I've made there over the years. There's also a Telegram group with Lambo Land and a few others called Conviction Labs that he like 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, was just like, man, I want to get together some guys that I really like to talk with online that I think are pretty decent traders. And we're going to make a little small group of 15 of us. And we're just going to talk about what plays we're going to make. And like share our trading thesis, share ideas of what we think might be useful or valuable, and kind of see what shakes out. And that's been really valuable because it's 15 really, really smart guys that I respect. And when they have an idea for a trade, you kind of want to listen to what they're saying and you can evaluate for yourself and see if it makes sense to the spot you want to enter. So it's all about high signal. So if you can find ways to curate your timeline, the funniest thing is like I found AXBT literally on Twitter. And it was because I've, over the last year, tried to be really careful to mute people that don't provide anything interesting, but are like always interested in drama or always like just running, like yapping about stuff that isn't crypto related or isn't really actionable. And so if you get rid of the noise and you start following and interacting with people that are talking about interesting things, the algorithm does a pretty good job of showing you more stuff in that same vein, which I was kind of confused when people complain about the Twitter algorithm. I'm like, it shows you what you want to see. And so if you're upset with what it's showing you, then that probably reflects on what you're interacting with. But so that, I think there's like not really a secret to it. It just takes time, spending time interacting with the right content and ignoring the content that isn't helpful. That's how I'd identify them. Is you have different signal sources where people share ideas with you, or your timeline itself where cool things get served to you.
Is there anybody on Twitter where you're like, whenever that person posts something, you're like, okay, I need to research this immediately? Like any people like that the audience should be following?
Yeah, so I think Sammy.eth does a great, it's S4MMY. He does an awesome job every single day of putting out like this very comprehensive AI agent, AI landscape piece. I think he's very smart and very good at what he does. Um, OX Jeff will put out research papers or articles pretty regularly. Um, there he is. Yeah. And so his stuff, if he writes an article, I'm going to read it. And there you go. DeFi. He has DeFi equals DeFi. That's been kind of like, that was my most recent, very solid public trade. Was on Anon. It's DeFi. And so Jeff knows what he's talking about. Liam Herbst, I think he is probably one of the like cleverest people I've met on Twitter. He sees narratives before other people do. Lately, he's been very bullish on Kaido. I think he's right. Even though I know a couple weeks back there was a lot of fun about how they like did their Genesis mint. I think he's really, really right. That Kaido is going to be a real winner for a lot of people. So I think that's a good follow. Legendary Gains is a great one. These are all guys that I talk with regularly, so of course I'm going to hype up my boys. But they're all just like plugged in and dialed in on AI stuff. And so if they're talking about something, it's probably worth at least looking at.
Completely agree. So that's how you're finding stuff. These are the people you're following. So now let's get to the evaluation side of the question. Yeah, how are you evaluating these coins and figuring out which one's a LARP? Like, are you reaching out to teams? Are you just doing a deep dive on your own?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the dev. So you look at who the dev is, and do they have an actual ability to produce? Like, do they have a history of developing things? Do they, like in the case of Trust, the Trust agent? I know DJ Ape. He has been a profitable public trader for a long time. So this idea of, oh, let's train an agent on literally years of my own trading data, that is a good idea. If it's somebody that has no public record of trading and like has been profitable or whatever, why in the world would you think they could be successful at building an automated trading agent? Like that doesn't make any sense. But so it's almost like an element of just common sense. You look at, okay, this person is doing this. Do they have anything in their background to make it seem reasonable that they can do this? And so that's the same, like people on Solana, they end up looking at GitHubs a whole lot and trying to figure out, hey, is this developer, have they ever actually coded anything? I think those are all smart ways of doing it. For me, it really does come down to, okay, what's the idea and who is the dev and do they have any reason, like public reason for why I should believe they can actually get to this idea?
And it doesn't mean just because the dev doesn't, like, it's not going to be a good play here. You could still make a 5-10x, but
Totally.
we're talking about like more long-term, making a conviction play, maybe putting in a larger portion of your funds into that agent and making like a big bet.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing is like a lot of this stuff trades at crazy valuations, like even with total vapor underneath it. I mean, who knows? All this stuff could be total vapor. I mean, it's not like we're here to replace OpenAI or like that. Like none of that's going to have people think, oh, crypto, Twitter, and AI is really going to like scare Claude or like Sam Altman's going to be asking crypto Twitter people to do. It's like no. That those companies have thousands of employees. They have billions of dollars of head start. Like we're trading ideas for the most part. Some of them will be cool and some will be profitable. But a lot of them, I mean, it's pretty similar to previous cycle, like 2017 ICOs or 2021 NFTs. Some of these things will retain value long term and they'll be big winners, but a lot of them are going to end up having, in retrospect, been total vapor.
Do you think any like Virtual's protocol or any of these infra plays, do you think they're actually going to break into Web 2 and be used by a big company to maybe launch their own agents?
That's a hard one. It's a little bit hard for me to believe that a like publicly traded company would end up using open source code to launch an agent to perform something on their behalf. Generally, stockholder-based companies are not going to open source a ton of their stuff, at least their proprietary things that provide value or like services for customers. So in that sense, I don't know, but also like if you had told me a year ago that we'd be trading tokenized ChatGPT wrappers, I like wouldn't have believed that either. And I also wouldn't have believed that like OpenAI would come out with these pretty cool tools, and like I wouldn't have believed that Sora and these other video generators would be able to create like mostly lifelike looking videos off of a 30-word prompt. So I think it would be foolish for me to say no. It's just hard to see that happening at this point. But we've been really surprised over the last 2 years with how AI has advanced anyway.
It's moving incredibly quickly, and I think a lot of people this cycle are facing the issue with the whole, is the 4-year cycle going to repeat and what we're going to go into a bear market again for 2 years, or are we actually going to break through for Bitcoin? But then for a lot of these, for gaming chains and for AI and stuff, I think a lot of people are facing that crisis, like, where do I actually sell here, or am I papering in the long term? And it's a really tough one to gauge for sure.
It's a super tough one. I mean, I think that like I said, I think a lot of this stuff we'll look back on as, oh, this was vapor, but there will be some winners. That outlook generally is a big part of why I kind of trim back to majors on a pretty regular basis. If I hit a good trade, I'm absolutely going to return to ETH and Bitcoin, because I think those have shown long lasting like staying power. And then, I mean, obviously still have exposure, but the end game of all of playing metas is to stack majors, and people often forget that. So it's something that doesn't make much sense when you're in a really good trade. You're like, why would I ever sell this and keep going up forever? And the reality is it can't. So you end up at the end of the day, you want to trade something that is overvalued for something that is undervalued. That's literally the game.
Yeah. Let's jump back into so your research process. So you look at the dev. Is this somebody who I believe he can build something? And I mean, you're well deserved. You are in a position where you could probably reach out to those devs. So is that part of your process? You're actually trying to chat with these teams and figure out what they're trying to build long term, and if there's something more to what they've publicly released?
I rely sometimes on my buddies that do that. I don't actually do a whole lot of dev outreach. I got burned on a lot of NFT projects by getting closer to founders and CEOs and
Same. You
devs
can't
of those.
sell.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you get emotionally invested. Like you have a relationship with the founder, the builder, and so you feel bad about selling. And so I try to avoid a lot of that and open source most of my information at this point. I've got friends who take a lot of calls with founders, and so like I trust their judgments on that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's what does their public record show, and that's kind of what I try to go off of.
Is there any place? I mean, I know you post a lot publicly, which is amazing. Is there any group, or I guess it's the ones that you already mentioned, where you're posting your alpha, like, hey, I think this is a good buy at this price, where maybe people could pay to be in a group, or it's a free group or whatever it is? Or is it purely just on your Twitter? That's the main place to sharing your plays.
It's mostly on Twitter. Like I obviously share ideas with these guys in these groups that I've toyed around with for a long time, before anybody really cared about what I said on Twitter, just because they're my friends. And I've always kind of talked about ideas with them. I mean, the reality is like some of the ideas that we share turn out to be totally, totally wrong. And I think that's part of why I've never really been much for like the paid access or the paid alpha, because I don't want somebody paying to get like bad information from me. Whereas if it's a pretty close group of friends, everybody kind of knows that we're all here trying to win the game. And we also kind of all have this unspoken rule that none of us are like hyping up a play to dump onto each other. Whereas when you get into a paid group, a lot of the time you'll end up with more people in there that are just trying to find something to make profit, as opposed to like really make longer term bets. I mean, which is totally fair. There's a lot of guys I know that run very successful groups that do that, and a lot of them make a lot of money trading. And but it's just never really been my thing. Mostly because I feel bad if somebody was like, oh, ICO said this was a good idea, and then it went minus 90% in a week. And I'd be like, well, yeah, I mean, I also got burned here, but I do feel bad.
Exactly.
Like, so it's just one of those things. Like I'm here because I want to be here and I want to provide value and I want to help people win. It's what I've really built the entire brand on for the last year is trying to show people how to win in a game that's often kind of skewed towards insiders. And it's one of those things where I'd really hate to be part of somebody buying the Pico top of something because I was like publicly or privately bullish on it, and then we all got smoked.
That makes perfect sense. Maybe you could walk us through one of your recent plays, which you called publicly. This is the right one, right? This is Anon.
Yeah.
Hey, Anon.
Okay. It's almost got a little bit today.
Yeah. So dude, I remember seeing, I shouldn't have faded you, dude. You posted this thing when it was at what, 35 mil FDV?
Yeah.
Okay, $1. Wow, $1.80. It's currently almost at $15. I know it might be harder to see here. So this thing has been basically up only. So I guess let's run through your whole process. Like, how did you find this? How did you evaluate it? And then how did you evaluate it long term that you should hold till $15 from $1.80?
Yeah, so this one I think is probably one of my favorite recent plays, and mostly because it worked out. Those are the kind of the most fun ones. But so this token is by Danny Sesta, and people that have been around crypto for more than 3 or 4 years will probably remember him either with fond memories or with like total vitriol and hatred, depending on how quickly they got in or out of Time and Wonderland and Spell and a few other DeFi Ponzi coins. Um, so he ran a couple of coins up into the billion, like $2 billion range last cycle on these like crazy DeFi flywheels. He's known for the Lambo calculator. Um,
It's
and
this guy,
people,
right?
some,
Oh,
no, actually, let me
no,
just
you
make
said
sure.
Danny.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's him, Danielle
Okay,
Sesta.
Daniel. Okay.
Yeah, so he made a lot of people a lot of money. He lost a lot of people a lot of money. There was also I don't 100% know all the backstory, but there was this other like co-founder or compatriot of his that ended up like actually scamming a bunch of people, I think. So that part I'm not 100% sure what went down there, but there were a lot of tears and also a lot of happiness based off of his prior cycle DeFi coins.
Hmm.
And so I wrote a thesis about a month and a half ago on how to categorize AI agents. It's an article on my Twitter, and it got a lot of love from crypto Twitter. It was kind of back before anybody really knew what we were doing with AI agents, and it was a stab at trying to figure out how to categorize these things and how to value them. And something that I wrote about in there, this was I think November 27th. It was an idea that I'd been thinking about, was that an agent, like utility agents, are the grail. So AXBT, trading agents, things that can do actual useful services for people are going to be massively valuable. The winners there will be just absolute kingmaker trades. And so part of that is agents that can do DeFi for you. If they can maximize your yields in LPs, or if they can do complicated cross-chain swaps for you and arb differences in price automatically, they're basically money printers. And so you've got to think that's a super, super, super valuable thing. And that's where Anon comes in. So I'd heard that Danny was running a pre-sale on Sonic, which is just this like I think it's a rebrand of the Phantom chain. I've literally never used it, and I have no intention of bridging there. But he was running the pre-sale on that chain at $21 million, and I was like, huh, $21 million. Nobody really knew exactly what the pre-sale was for, other than he was teasing that he was going to make this DeFi agent. I was like, hey, I've been talking about a DeFi agent. I wonder if this is going to do any good. And so the pre-sale sold out in minutes, and then everybody kind of forgot about it. And once the tokens got sent
You
out,
did the
people
pre-sale?
dumped. No, I didn't, because
Okay.
I never bridged to Sonic. I just like
Yeah, yeah.
don't want to. I don't really know how to. I assume it's easier than I'm believing it is because none of my friends did. But like, I have no interest in going there because I don't understand it. But what happened was I was watching the token price. It was floating in the 21 to 40 mil FDV range for a while. And I was like, okay, that's got two extra pre-salers. But then I found out they added liquidity to Base. They added a USDC pair. And I like Base. I've been on Base a lot. I didn't know they had already added it to Sol, but I found out they'd added it to Base. And I was like, well, shoot, I have funds on Base. I can buy this thing here. I don't have to worry with bridging. I don't do any of that. So I was like, all right, let's chunk some funds in there. And that was kind of that, because I'd seen more over time about, hey, this agent can take in text from you. Danny wrote a couple of articles about how his agent is different from the current offerings. And I was like, man, I think this is what I've been writing about. I think this is probably one of those agents that you want exposure to. The other one that I'm like really interested in is Wayfinder from Parallel. And they're trying to do something very similar, but this is already out. And if Prime and Parallel are trading in the billions, and this is sitting at $37 million, well, that's an obvious play. So it was one of those things, because it was on Sonic, because nobody really cared about it. But it's still like, I'd already put out the thesis of why this type of agent is really valuable. It would have been silly for me not to take that play, because if it isn't, it meant that I didn't believe my own trading thesis. But that's kind of how it came about. Is somebody poked me and said, hey, they added liquidity to Base, and I was like, sweet, I've been trying to get this thing, but I just like was too lazy to bridge, and now it's available, so I can grab it. And
Is
that's
this an agent though? Because I'm looking at the account and
yeah.
it's like
So
an automated. I'm used to seeing the automated things.
yeah, so the agent itself isn't really a Twitter chatbot. So a lot of
Okay,
these
okay,
things, they're just Twitter reply guys, whatever, hanging on. And I'm testing in the closed beta right now.
okay.
When you use Anon, it's actually a Telegram app, and you tell it what you want it to do, and it just does it. So like if I have a bunch of funds on Arbitrum and I say, hey, Anon, I want you to swap I want you to bridge all of this to Base, and I want you to swap half of it to Bitcoin, and the other half I want you to throw in an LP with ETH and virtuals. It'll do all that for me.
Wow.
And it just does it. And if it doesn't do it, you get in touch with Danny and say, hey, I need paths to be able to access these LPs or paths to be able to access this protocol, and he adds them.
Mm.
And so what he's doing is taking, hey, what do users actually want to do? And he's making sure that the agent has the tools it needs to be able to do that. And it's rather cool.
I can't wait for the agent to be able to do it itself. Like, hey, you're not able to do this, figure it out and get it done instead of having to message him.
Yeah. And so I think that over time, we'll see a lot more in that development. I think because Wayfinder's doing something similar there, but it's user centric as opposed to the developer adding these things. So if with Wayfinder, what I've heard is that if you add paths yourself for something, you can take a cut of the transaction fee when other people use that path.
Wow.
As a way to incentivize people adding useful abilities to the agent, which I think is a really interesting growth strategy. I think it'll probably do very well. But so it's two sides of the same coin. There's either the developer adding what people want or people adding what people want and then getting to benefit from it.
Yeah, that's a great idea to get devs to be building on your platform. You mentioned Prime. I mean, I'm super bullish on this. I guess the one thing I don't know how to evaluate is Prime versus they have a new upcoming token, Prompt. Do you have your Primes, or if you have Prime, do you have it staked? Do you have any avatars in order to get exposure to Prompt?
This is probably one of my more embarrassing trades this cycle is I don't have exposure to Prime right now. I mean, who knows? It probably goes a lot higher, especially if Wayfinder's a hit. But I felt like I missed the boat on it. So whereas its FDV is already like $1 billion or $1.5 billion or something, I felt like I missed it. And I mean, this was when I was evaluating things when the AI sector as a whole was at like 6 or 7 billion. So I mean, clearly I was wrong because it's already at 15 billion, and I do think it probably goes closer to 100 billion than staying around here. But there's a lot of different weird games with like locking up your Prime and like caching it for Prompt, and I don't fully understand the lockup schedules. I don't fully understand who gets what tokens when, and that's kind of part of just the maturation process of doing multiple cycles. Is if there's so many different ways to win the game that if there's a play that you don't really understand, I find it's often better to avoid it than to just ape into something that sounds cool or that all your friends are if you really don't quite understand. Because borrowed conviction ultimately doesn't do you very much. Sometimes it can make you win, but it also makes you paper if you don't get it.
Me, it's been the opposite, dude. I've been having trouble just turning my brain on. Like GOAT, I had GOAT at 3.8 mil, and I sold it because I'm like, this doesn't feel like an AI. I didn't do the research. I should have done the research, and then my bag would have been worth $750,000. And I kind of faded the whole AI meta because of that. I was like, oh, I'll just wait for this to pass, and it has not passed, and it
so
continues
far,
to go. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
So just to finish up on Anon, so I know you compared it to Prime, and that's one of the reasons why you thought it was going to go much higher. How did you set a price target here, and what is your price target on Anon?
Yeah, so on the way up, so far I've trimmed some. I've got my initials out. The rest of it I've got sitting in an LP to a pretty stupid valuation. So it'll eventually sell out of the position if it gets much closer to 1 billion.
Could you explain just quickly what that means, the LP part?
Yeah. So imagine if you have a bunch of NFTs and you've got a bunch of them, but you think they're worth more than they currently are. And so the way you get rid of those, instead of dumping them into blur bids or dumping into wheats, is you just list them above the floor and you ladder them. And so people, as the price goes up, they'll buy them from you. LPing is very similar. It just uses a liquidity pool, which is like the market maker for an AMM, which is an automated market maker. It's the way that people buy and sell tokens out of a pool as opposed to a limit order book. And if you set a single-sided LP, that means you are basically saying, hey, all of my tokens are for sale from this price to some price that's way higher. And as the price goes up, those tokens will get pulled out of that pool. And so it's a way to DCA out. So like, yeah, if you ended up holding all of your tokens and then just full stack them at the top, you would make more money. But nobody times tops, right? We're all guessing at these valuations. And so I find that providing liquidity is a better way for me to DCA out of positions in ranges that I think are possible for it to go. And also you get fees. So as people trade in and out of the pool, you get a cut of each trade depending on how much of your liquidity is in there compared to the rest of the volume. And so as price goes up and down and ranges like inside the range where you've said, hey, I'm willing to sell my tokens for this range of prices, you're collecting fees on all the up and down motion. So you end up making money that way too.
Yeah. So it kind of sounds like just setting a limit order in like a Bullex or on a centralized exchange with the added benefit of earning these fees.
Yeah. It's like setting a ton of limit orders.
Yeah.
So it's like setting thousands of those all the way up.
Yeah. What platform are you doing? Is it like Meteora or Radium or?
Yeah, so Meteor and Radium are kind of the two main ones on Sol. There's probably some others. Those ones I like to use. And then Uniswap is how you do pretty much all of liquidity provision on Base. I think Aerodrome can also do stuff, but I like the flexibility of setting custom ranges and stuff on Uniswap v3.
Got you. Okay, so you've been LPing out, and then if you're willing to reveal your targets on Hey Anon.
I mean, I think I mentioned my tokens will all be gone somewhere much closer to 1 billion than where they are right now. That being said, I've got a lot of fees that have been collected as it's gone up and down and done that. So I'll probably hold those for a long time. And I think
those fees are earned in the token itself, not in Solana or ETH.
In both, actually. So okay. when people buy the price up, you get fees in, I think that should be, so assuming this is Sol side, if they are buying your Anon tokens out of the pool, I believe you get Sol, because part of the transaction fee or like swap fee is them giving Sol into the pool and you get a fraction of that and they take your Anon out. On the way down, you are getting Anon as part of the fee because they're buying your Sol with their token.
Got you.
It's a little bit backwards than what I would think it should be, but I think that's how it works. My brain's a little bit fried this morning.
I'll possibly do a tutorial on it. It's been something that's interesting me for a while. I mean, I always see you and some other guys posting about like, I earn these fees super quick, especially when a new token launches, everybody's earning these fees. I'm like, dude, I'm just holding and getting nothing out of it. Or I've put it into the Meteora pools for the tokens that do have it, but I need to be taking advantage of these fees, man.
Well, I tell you what, the AIXBT pool yesterday absolutely printed money because when it got listed on Binance, there was tons of volume buying it. And so it swept across most of my range, but then it dumped right back to the same price it started at. And so all of I think there were like, almost 2 million on-chain volume on Solana. And there's only like a couple 100K in this LP that I'm in. And so there's crazy volume, but there ended up being like mid 5 figures in fees that were given out to people in this pool. Wow. And so because it ended up going back, I mean, if it had gone all the way up and stayed up, then yeah, I would have lost a bunch of my tokens. There's impermanent loss, and those are kind of the risks associated with LPing. But because it came back to like close to my midpoint, I ended up keeping almost the exact balance of tokens that I had on both sides, plus all the fees. And so that's part of the fun with it is when there's a lot of volume on a token, there's a lot of swap fees that come out, and you end up being able, like I said, there's a lot of ways to win.
Do you use a tool to monitor to make sure you don't get impermanent loss or?
No. I think largely impermanent loss is kind of a boogeyman at this point because somehow Pump Fund and these other launchers psyoped everybody into thinking it's like reasonable somehow to allow 1% to 2% trading fees on all these swaps. And so because of the amount of fees you get on high volume tokens, even if you experience impermanent loss, a lot of the time if you pick the right pairs, you're going to more than make up for that on fees. It used to not be the case when swap fees on chain were like 0.1% or whatever, then you started to get a little bit more concerned about it. But when people are paying 1% to 2% just to like as a flat fee on top of every single swap, that's a lot of money going to market makers and liquidity providers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Moving on here, I did want to just go over some tools. Are there any tools that you're using for data, for tracking stuff? I mean, I know you mentioned Kaido. They have the really good mindshare maps. Is there anything, are you using Kaido? And then is there anything else that you're using like on a daily basis where you're like, all traders should be using this?
It's pretty funny. I'm like maybe the weirdest non-technical trader in existence. I like to tell my buddies it's mostly vibes based So I do check in on Kaido. Like I use Kaido. I like to see kind of what's leading Mindshare. And like Sammy and in Legendary's posts, they often use Cookie or Kaido analytics to kind of showcase where Mindshare is relative to market capitalization. And so I read those. But the vast majority of this stuff is just based on reading Twitter because I've curated those feeds. So I've got friends that use a lot of different analytics tools. I know there's people that use wallet trackers, use a whole bunch of stuff. I don't have a single wallet tracker that I look at. I know there's a lot of successful traders that do that. A lot of people do that, and that's great. That's not my game. It's just not something that I've ever found. I think it falls into, again, this idea of borrowing conviction. If you say, oh, this person, it must be a good token. For me, that's not the investment thesis, investment in quotes. That's not the thesis that I want for a trade. Just because I have no idea what they're thinking. And so just following their wallet. If I'm doing that, I imagine there's a lot of other people doing it. And so it becomes kind of a prisoner dilemma or a fire in a crowded theater. Eventually the exit is too small for everybody to get out. And so less crowded trades are kind of my preferred ones. That's why I don't really pay attention to wallets.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know one of my friends, Captain Y, is building a tool and it does a lot of the wallet tracking stuff. It uses AI to evaluate it, but it's not so much like, hey, buy this. It's more, maybe you should pay attention to this token, which I really like. Like I've made some great plays off of it.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of value, in my opinion, for the wallet tracking. But like you said, if you're just blindly following anybody, you're probably going to get wrecked. And a lot of these guys who are openly publicly sharing their wallets, like on GMGN, where people are attaching it to their Twitter, I'm like, they're probably buying on 5 wallets before buying it on this wallet that everybody knows about. So you need to get on the smart wallets, not the public KOL wallets. So you're going to get absolutely wrecked.
What I will say, the other thing is probably a bunch of my buddies do use these tools. So there's a strong likelihood, I would say, that a lot of these plays that they talk about in our different groups, they like say, hey, I'm looking at this one, or oh, this token looks interesting. A lot of that probably is a product of using a number of these tools. I just don't use them myself.
Got you. To end it, last question. Is there anything upcoming that maybe hasn't launched yet or hasn't caught a bid that you're looking at that you want to reveal? Because I understand you might not want to give away the sauce here, but is there anything that you're looking at and you're like, oh, this is the next wave, or like, I got to invest in this or get a whitelist for this or whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one probably is shared by a lot of crypto Twitter. I'm actually pretty interested in looking at Abstract. I think that what Saigar, as a dev for AI stuff and using the ELIZA framework over there, I think there'll be a lot of interesting projects that show up. I'm not still totally convinced of like the long run value proposition of Abstract. I don't quite understand how they're going to differentiate themselves as the consumer chain when there's been a number of people that have tried to do that. Because primarily L2s have just been like airdrop farmers, and then they get tossed to the side once incentives are over. That being said, there's a lot of interesting projects launching there that involve AI to some degree. So Gigaverse from the guys that run the GLHFers. I think Dith is kind of the front man there. That one's what I'm looking at. On-chain Heroes from Scarly. I think that one's going to do really well. There's some different launches, like coin launchers and things on Abstract, like buzz markets. I think that'll be kind of interesting. I don't know exactly what their product looks like. I'm supposed to get to try it out soon. Primarily, I'm excited because I think that Gatekeep is going to be integrating with a number of launchers soon. I think some of those are going to be on Abstract. And so Pop Punk, he developed Gaslight, which is a cool airdrop tool, but they've been working on how to make fair launch token technology for pump funds. So instead of having snipers that get 30% of the supply on a million different wallets and then just FSH on everybody, they have like programmatic ways to prevent that from happening, to allow people to get in at fair valuations for tokens that are interesting. So that's cool. There's a couple of different projects. I'm not sure if I'm really allowed to talk about them, because I don't know how much I'm supposed to know or not know. There's one called Monsters Fun that's going to launch on Abstract that I think looks really cool. I haven't gotten to see a ton underneath the surface yet, but AI Pokemon related stuff I think is neat. I think it's fun just from a like nostalgia effect, and I think they're actually going to have a shot at being cool games, whereas a lot of the stuff in the 2022 2023 NFT wave that tried to be the next Pokemon of NFTs or whatever ended up being total crap. I think Abstract and AI on Abstract is something that I'm going to lean pretty heavily into. It's hard to say for sure what all it's going to look like because the chain isn't live yet. But that's something that I'm going to be watching pretty closely.
Appreciate that, man. I'm going to look into all of those. Yeah, appreciate the alpha. And dude, I appreciate you taking the time to come explain to everybody your process, what you're doing, how you're evaluating everything. Very informative. And yeah, in the future, would love to have you again in the future.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. It's fun talking about this stuff. I've been doing crypto for a long time because I love it. I'm here because I want to be here, not because I need to be here. And I think it's one of the cool, pretty accessible places for somebody with an internet connection and not much else, to get exposure to really interesting and exciting things.
Love it, dude. Yeah, love it. Anyway, we'll end it here. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. As usual, if you haven't already done so, would you kindly hit that subscribe button, smash that bell notification. Thanks for watching another Crypto Gorilla video. Peace.